Thank you. Okay, we're back in open session, and the next item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone here this evening for public comment? Seeing none. The next item is a welcome for Mr. Curtis Ross, who is our new technical appraiser for the town of Milton in the assessor's office. And we have one of the assessors, Bill Bennett, and also Bob Bushway, who's the chief appraiser, and Mr. Ross, who's our new employee. Welcome, and please join us at the table.
Okay, there you go.
It's Curtis's turn to be inspired.
Right. So, yeah, we're very excited to have Curtis Ross join us. He has been started on Monday. He's been doing great. Throwing him right into the fire. We've been going out every day.
Right, which is a good thing.
So,
absolutely.
Doing a lot of building permit inspections. Curtis came here. We took him from the city of Newton. He worked in the city of Newton's assessor's office for the past several years, and a graduate of Northeastern. I don't want to steal all your thunder. I'll let you take it from there. But we're really excited to have Curtis on board.
Right, absolutely. So yeah, been coming from the city of Newton. Been there since November of 2016. So started in the Treasury Department, then moved over to the assessing, where I worked mostly as the exemption coordinator. So pretty much well-rounded in vehicle excise, tax abatements, as well as exemptions, and then moved over to appraisal tech, and I was granted this amazing opportunity to come to Milton. I am a Hyde Park resident, been in Boston pretty much all my life, so Milton's right there. Nice commute. Met everyone is great. So far, everything's been going very, very well. So I've managed to get an idea of the community and the area of Newton, and I'm enjoying it so far. And Bob's been excellent. So, and thank you for having me.
Bob said he came back after the first day, so.
Yeah, that's the real test.
It's good. Right.
Well, welcome aboard, Mr. Ross.
Thank you.
Mr. Denny, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to welcome him to the town. He was thoroughly amazing in the interview process. Mr. Bushway has institutional knowledge about the city of Newton. That's where he began his career. So he can attest that Mr. Ross's pedigree is spectacular. So this is a new position. Obviously, we have John Grove for 2 years. So we did contract a lot of this work out through Patriot, and John was a welcome addition and great asset to the town. And now Curtis can carry that ball forward for us. So I told him, one of the hardest things is negotiate a way around town in the electric vehicle because it's so quiet, and pedestrians and cyclists can't hear you. So you just need to be a little extra careful when you're driving that electric vehicle around town.
Right.
He's been out and about for 3 days since he's got here, and very welcomed in town hall by everyone, and members of the public will start to see him as he heads out to the field and does some of that necessary technical appraisal work for the town. So welcome, Curtis.
Thank you.
Very thankful to have you.
So, Curtis, you'll be going to homes to do appraisals of the homes for purposes of assessments.
Yes.
Primarily building permits, because there's so many of them right now, and we're playing a little bit of catch-up, because there's a little bit of lag between John leaving and Curtis coming on board, but he's been doing great. We're catching up, and never a dull moment.
Right.
There's a lot going on, so we're great to have.
And the residents have been great, too.
Yeah, great part of the team, and obviously Nancy Shibley's been there for so many years. Huge asset. Over 1,500 permits pulled last year in the town, so there is a lot of work to do and catch up on.
The work that we do, the work that Nancy does in the office allows Curtis and I to do what we do. So it's a good effort, good team effort.
It is.
Anyone have any comments or questions for Mr. Ross or Mr. Bushway or Mr. Bennett? Ms. Collins.
Well, I just wanted to say, Mr. Ross, I was really interested in your background because you have a lot of varied experience that I think we're really going to benefit from, and obviously that's the case because Bob thinks so too, and we both having worked in Newton, I just want to thank you because we really, revenue doesn't come in by itself, and we can't service residents, it's a key function.
But again, thank you for this amazing opportunity. Right.
Well, thank you for taking it. Let me add my welcome.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else from Mr. Bushway or Mr. Bennett?
Welcome aboard. It's going to be great addition to the team.
Well, thank you for coming in tonight to introduce yourself. And a lot of people watch these meetings, surprisingly, or watch the tapes of them after the fact, so. So it's good for you to, a lot of residents to get to see you. And
Right, yes.
when you show up at their door, they'll know that you're here from the town of Milton.
Right.
Right.
Good luck with the electric vehicle. That's news to me,
Very
how
quiet,
quiet they
yeah.
are,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I learned something new
We
already.
have 3 electric vehicles. The assessor's office owns one, the building commissioner's office owns the other, and then we have a pool vehicle. But I drive it often, and people, they just don't hear you.
Right.
It's so quiet.
They turn
A lot
around
of
getting
miles.
out of their
There's-
car and just go to cross the street and you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the assessor's office does so many miles every year doing their inspections, so.
They've been great, though. I mean, before we had this big old Ford Explorer, an old police cruiser, so we drive around, everybody thought we were the police. So these are really nice, so.
Well, thanks so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Welcome
Thanks
aboard.
very much.
Welcome.
Great.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Bennett.
Bill.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr.
Curtis.
Bennett.
All right.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a departmental report from the fire chief. Joined by Chief Madden this evening.
You can. It's kind of hard to read. It's very general. I can talk through it. I'm just going to hit the high points. How are
Good
you?
evening, Chief.
How's things?
I think everything's good. Thanks for waiting. We were in executive session for a little while, so we're getting you on a little bit later than we thought.
No worries,
We
no
appreciate
worries.
your being here, getting
No
here
worries.
early.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Just to kind of, I think the last time we talked was in December, I believe. Just busy. So I kind of went from January 1st till June 30th. For the department, we did like 2,100 runs, or 2,100 incidents. And, I was just talking to the MPD brethren in the back, and we were just talking about, some of the incidents that we've had over the last, 6 months or a year have been pretty significant. And 2,100 runs seems, doesn't seem like that many, but in 6 months, it's pretty busy. We're a pretty busy department. We do a lot. And, on the bigger side, obviously the Who's It Club, that was very, very difficult as a town, and being on the opposite side of that, you wish we could have done more, but it got ahead of us, and old building, so the bigger ones, EMS runs, we did 1,100 EMS runs as a department. Hazardous conditions, which could be gas leaks or whatever, 40. False alarms, 278. But false alarms, a lot of times, are not false alarms. Sometimes they can be malicious false alarms or whatever, but a lot of times the false alarms are, if we get called, if someone has ADT or something like that, and they burn their food, as they're cooking dinner or something like that, we get called, and, we'll term it a false alarm. But a lot of times, if that food was unattended, it could start into a fire. So yes, technically, you look at almost 300 false alarms, but most of them were probably something in that nature, whether it was, someone cooking food in a microwave or something like that. So, and I skipped a lot of some of the smaller stuff, and then, for the ones I wanted to highlight was that we did have 27 confirmed COVID cases that we directly had, some, help with it. They called 911, they were in desperate need of assistance, so the fire department showed up and, suited up, did the proper precautions and assisted them along with Fallon Ambulance. And then, one of the things that I always look at is, there's 1,300 runs that we went to that we were COVID unknown, so we don't know, so when we look at some of the things that, some of the things that we take precautions with, and always wearing our mask and our gloves and everything else, and we just don't know what's on the other side of that door when we go to someone's house or whatever. So that is something that always in the back of our mind. We don't know what's there, so we always have to take those full precautions. And we term it unknown, just because you can't really ask anybody, do you have COVID or whatever, but we always just make sure that if they have COVID-like symptoms or they tell us that it's COVID, then we would make sure that we document it as COVID or COVID unknown. So I think those are some of the bigger numbers for us with the incidents. The next thing, the budget, I think we came in under budget for the last fiscal year. It was very difficult. We've had some, for myself, for the first year being in this position, managing the budget. I can't thank, Amy Dexter and Karen Praval and Mike and Paige, and then obviously Patty Ambrose, the executive, assistant at the fire department. She was just a wealth of knowledge, and she helped out huge. So we got through the year, some trying times with the injuries and stuff like that. So we're there, and going forward, it's going to be just as difficult with the hit in the budget that we had, and but we'll try, and we're going to do the right things and try and make sure that we have a professional, adequately trained staff, fire department moving forward with that. So the next thing I listed here was training. One of the things, my beliefs is that properly trained professional department should be well trained, and you're going to see the fire department out a lot, and we do get calls. Why is the fire truck at the high school every day? Well, right now we are doing inspections, not inspections. We have to do quarterly inspections of all the schools, so we have to go into the schools quarterly, but this time when the schools are empty, we're doing the groups, the whole groups, all 3 engines, the ladder, the deputy, are all going through the school at the same time to make sure that we're all looking at the same stuff. And when we do the inspections during the school year, we're all looking at the same things to making sure that the schools are safe. So they're in the schools for the next, I believe, 3-4 weeks to get all the schools. Every member of the department will go through every school to have an intimate knowledge of the schools, so they know exactly where the nurse's office is, where the gymnasiums, the cafeteria, where the standpipes are for if we have a fire or anything like that. So all that intimate knowledge they'll have. So you look, one of the big things, and obviously, it was the drowning at Houghton's Pond. So we've worked, I think we were up there for 3 weeks up with the Houghton's Pond, working with the DCR, their lifeguards, their park rangers to make sure, we started with obviously, drownings, near drownings, CPR in progress, and work with their lifeguards so we know what equipment they have, they know what the equipment that we have, and then we kind of went into like lost hikers, injured hikers, and so forth. So, and we go up there a lot for the injured hikers. It's a great place to get some exercise, but sometimes they fall in some terrible positions, so we really have to be trained and to know their location and how to extricate the patients out, with Fallon. So, so we did that. I know when I talked to Mr. Dennehy, Forbes House, they invited us in. There's a large value there that needs to be protected, and we can't just go in and break stuff for so they told us where the large values items are, and what is important in there, because if you haven't been in there, you don't know what exactly they have in there, and what a fantastic place that is. If you haven't been in, it's great. So we worked with them. Again, Milton Schools. We worked with the Walcott Woods, the new complex going in. They had a house that they were tearing down, and they allowed us to use it, and we did some ladder work. We did some search and rescue. Search and rescue training in those buildings. So it was invaluable. I mean, to be able to black out a firefighter and have them search through a house that they've never been into before and find a rescue victim or a rescue dummy and extricate them in a pretty decent amount of time. It was great training, and you just can't. It's as close as you can get to an actual building fire. So we can't thank them enough. They gave us a building. We had it, I think, for about 3 weeks. And then we've been working on training a lot with Fallon, with our EMS. So we have 9 future EMTs. We had 4 in the class, and then 5 in a class. And so 4 in the class, then COVID hit, and everything was shut down, so they got delayed. So now we have 9 that are basically waiting to take the national exam to become nationally registered EMTs. And then we've also been working with the DPW. They allow us to use their space for auto extrication. Auto Service and Tire will donate a couple of cars for us, vehicles, and we'll use our auto extrication equipment and do that. So we've been doing that. And Greg McEntee, who's the water person at the DPW, he's been working with us. The only way to put out a fire is through water, and to use water, use a hydrant and so forth to practice with that. That has to be seamless, and they were great to allow us to do that. So we've done that. Now on to we've had a couple of retirements. Firefighter Angel Calderon with 30 years of service. He retired back in late February. Firefighter Kevin Kelly, he had 15 years. He retired in April. And firefighter Tom Cicerone, who had 41 years of service to the town. If you could draw a picture of a firefighter, Tom Cicerone would be it. He was a hazmat tech. He was on the tech rescue, the Norfolk County Technical Rescue. He was a wealth of knowledge, and every new guy, it took a little bit to get him to warm up to you, but once he warmed up to you, he was a wealth of knowledge and such a great mentor for the new firefighters on the department. He will sorely be missed. So that led to 3 new firefighters, Stephen Butler, Matthew Clifford, and Owen O'Sullivan, all residents of the town. They're currently on day 3 at the Massachusetts Firefighting Academy right now out in Springfield. Springfield Fire has allowed us to use one of their firehouses to house the firefighters during the week, Monday through Friday, so they can stay there. So Springfield Fire has been great. 3 great kids that really look forward to. They did a week of training with us, and the members of the department can't speak highly enough, and they're really excited for those 3 to stop with us full time. Current staffing, we are still -1. We did have, so those retirements came pretty quickly. We did have a retirement at the end of last year, and trying to fill the spots at the fire academy, obviously it's very, very difficult. It's an 8-month wait. We were lucky enough to get the 3 spots out in Springfield. So we're still down 1, and we do have another person that is going to retire soon. I believe at the beginning of September. So I have 2 new firefighters that are basically, they have an academy date. They've been through the physicals and everything else, and they're just waiting for their academy date. And when we get closer, their academy date is beginning of December. When we get closer, we'll bring them on, we'll train them for a week, and then they'll attend the academy and then come back full-time. And so that would be fill us to where we go. Some of the current projects that we have, the new firehouses, can't thank you enough for the support that you have given the fire department over the last few years of really pushing that project through. We appreciate it. Working with the Fire Station Building Committee, I am just in awe of how much work that they have done. It just, a lot of people think they know what we do, and but until we actually sit down with us and talk to us, you're like, I didn't know you did that way. I didn't know you, and they have taken the time, and they've vetted every question possible and have educated themselves about to what we do and how not only the Milton Fire does it, but Needham Fire and Lexington Fire and Wayland and they've Hingham, and they've gone to all these other fire departments to see how they do it, to see their firehouses, and they've done a tremendous job. I can't thank them enough. So the firehouses, they're getting close. We had a great meeting last night. They're getting very, very close. The capital improvement item that we did with the Milton Police was the Pro Phoenix software. So that's the fire, national incident reporting software for the fire department. Same for the police on the police side. I'm sure John King or Chief King can enlighten you a little bit more on his side, but the other part is the computer-aided dispatch software. So we will all be on the same software, and so we'll be able to share a lot of the knowledge. So one of the things that we would plan to do is, when we go through the schools, we can kind of make a file on all the building blueprints and where the electrical shutoffs, where the water shutoffs, and where this is and where that is, and we can share that information with MPD in case they ever have an incident at one of the buildings that we've pre-incident planned. And so they would have all that information and be able to, we'd be able to share it with them. So that is a huge undertaking, and we do have a couple of people, MPD, Rob from the IT department is heavily involved. He's great. Deputy Chief Murphy for us, Lieutenant Steve King, Lieutenant Brian Kennedy for us are our point people on that to really get that software up and running. And we have an ambitious date of December 28th to get that up and running. It'll be good. A lot of work, but it'll be good. One of the capital improvement items that we have is our new command vehicle. You've seen it outside the firehouse, just waiting for the lights and sirens, and the COVID has delayed everything. So just waiting for that vehicle to get delivered and then to get it outfitted with lights. You know, they're looking for switches and everything else. So that, hopefully that'll be soon to get that new command vehicle on the road. We've updated some equipment. You know, we've had the ability to update some of the equipment that we have, and we plan on updating equipment as we need it. And one of the big things for us and for myself and Lieutenant Steve Italiano, who's the fire prevention officer, is working with Tim Swerinsky and the town planner and the, you know, the building department in these new projects. There's a ton of new projects. These projects are just, I thank Lieutenant Italiano. I can't thank him enough. He's been in the position for a few years, so he's familiar with a lot of you looking at plans and stuff like that. And I have reached out to the Department of Fire Services, the Code Compliance Office, on a few of the projects, just to make sure that I'm up to speed on some of the things, the projects that we have. You know, one of the things that you look at from my point of view, you know, can we let this slide? Can we let that slide? And you know, public safety, you know, the safety of the residents is huge. It's paramount. And you know, there's reasons why we have codes. There's reasons why we have laws. And you know, just, I want to make sure that we get those correct and make sure that they follow all the local Massachusetts and, you know, federal codes, fire safety codes. And that's, we need to make sure that we do that. So working with the town planner and the building inspector, you know, Mr. Prondak, has been a great relationship so far. You know, they've always had a great relationship. So that's with those guys. And the last item that I have is, you know, with the retirement of firefighter Cicerone and Deputy Chief Linehan, he's close. He's not. So Milton Fire has a couple of members on the state hazmat team. Their knowledge and experience working with the state hazmat team was firefighter Cicerone and Deputy Chief Linehan. Right now, we are only down to Deputy Chief Linehan. We need to train a couple of our firefighters to fill those spots. I can't remember, I can't tell you how many times that you know, if we have any kind of chemical, I don't know if we saw what happened in Cambridge this morning, but they had a chemical and 12 firefighters were burned and had to go to the hospital. And it's a hazardous material where they went in and they thought it was just a fire, and they have let the fire out, but it was a hazardous material. And just having that the experience and the expertise of a seasoned hazmat tech, somebody that's taken the class and responded to those incidents. We have a hole right now, and so I'm going to try and fill that hole as quickly as we can, and then we'll prepare ourselves for when Deputy Chief Linehan does retire. And the other one is the Norfolk County Tech Rescue. I was a member of that, and firefighter Cicerone was too, and just the experience for the team. And again, I could have leaned on firefighter Cicerone for almost anything technical, whether it's a high angle rescue or slope evacuation, water rescue, if it was a building collapse or whatever it was. That's what the members of that team really they excel in. So we need to get a couple of members caught up to speed on that. You know, we're on with COVID. The training is, you know, for hazmat tech is 7 weeks of full-time training, and for the technical rescue team, it's right around 9 weeks for that. So just the training, we need to make sure that we fill those spots. Just you know, they learn so much from these other departments and other people that they work with on these county teams, and then they were able to bring that expertise back. Where firefighter Cicerone, one of the things that we in the technical rescue is lifting heavy objects. And when we had a tree fall on top of a car, probably about 2 years ago, he was the point person in how to lift that tree off of the car when somebody was still stuck inside. So just we need to make sure that we have that. Some of the other things that we're looking at is, you know, Lieutenant Pat Conley, the training officer, he's been great, but we need to get him up to the national standard to become a training officer. So that's like a week-long class that he would have to take. One of the other things that is near and dear to my heart is PTSD. PTSD is a very, very real thing. And like I said earlier, you know, the accidents that we've had this year, some of them have been pretty difficult to take in making sure that the well-being of our firefighters and police are just in EMS, the Fallon, making sure that they're okay. You know what I mean? So we're going to not hammer that home, but we're going to make sure that they understand that if they need to talk to somebody that we can talk to, and we'll bring the critical incident stress team in. We've brought them in a couple of times so far this year, but just to bring them in, say, every 6 months to let the members of the department know that if they need to talk to somebody, that they can. I think that was it. I had something on the top of that I didn't have on my list here, but I can't remember that right now. But it's just, training is for me is the way to go, to make sure that we're adequately staffed and trained. So
Thank you,
it was a
Chief.
lot. I apologize.
No, there was a lot of good information. Does anyone on the board have any comments or questions for the chief? Mr. Dennehy?
Yeah, Chief, could you just explain we got some calls after the 193 Central Ave
Yes.
Huzik fire. Who was in charge? Why did it take so long? Like, that building sat, burnt for quite some time, and I've had conversations with you and Inspector Lieutenant King about that, but just how does that work? Could you just explain to the public what took place? Yeah.
So the night of the fire, as the fire happened, we put a call into, we have two fire investigators on the department, Lieutenant Steve King and Lieutenant Larry Freeman. So we put a call into them, and they had them show up at the scene. And anytime that they need extra resources, and when Lieutenant King showed up at the scene, he knew immediately that he would need extra resources. And he called in the Massachusetts State Police Fire Investigation Unit. And their resources is when they have manpower, they have experience. Lieutenant Steve King, he is one of the most experienced fire investigators in the state. His credentials are, he is probably more well-trained than a lot of the troopers, but they have, size and numbers. They have multiple people that can really assist on that. And they also have the arson dogs, so the accelerant sniffing dogs. So when the fire was out, the state police and Lieutenant King started conducting their investigation. So they worked well into the next day investigating that fire, and they didn't find any really signs of accelerants or anything. So they kind of left it what they call like undetermined at that point, just because you don't want to say this is that, because new information may come out later on. So they left it undetermined. And what happened, since it was a large, and anytime you have a large dollar loss on anything, whether it's your house or, if you see a house that does catch fire, it usually takes almost 8 months to a year to start building that next house, because the insurance company is going to make sure that they understand the loss, what happened on that loss, how that fire started. So in the case of the Huzik Club, it was, you had the insurance company for the owner, you had the insurance company for the general contractor, you had the insurance company for the demolition company, you had the insurance company for the electrical company that was in there starting to, rewire the building. And so after Lieutenant King and the state police kind of closed, they didn't close it, they left it open, but they determined it undetermined. And that's how they left it. So, because the insurance company is going to come in and do their own investigation. And that's where Lieutenant King got a lot of his start. He worked for the insurance companies, investigating fires for insurance companies. So so everybody that has a stake in the game wants to send their own personal or private investigator into the building to investigate it. So, and it was at the lawyers of the insurance company whether they were going to investigate or not, whether the dollar loss was enough for them to, go forward with the investigation. So that's why it was protected, it had the fence around it for a while, and it was at the insurance companies that they were deciding on whether they would go forward with an investigation. And one of the things about investigating a fire like that is it's dangerous. You had to take it down, and I understand everybody was saying it's a dangerous spot. But once you start knocking the building down, you lose all sorts of evidence. So they wanted to leave that as pristine as possible until they decided to investigate it. And they did, and I believe it was back in April. May. I believe it was May, that I think approximately 8 insurance investigators, in conjunction with Lieutenant King, all showed up, and they investigated the fire together. They made it safe. They tore down the chimneys, made it safe for them to get inside and investigate the cause of it. And it was so badly burned that it was left undetermined, and that's where it's still undetermined in case any information comes out later. So, but I think all insurance companies, all investigators, Lieutenant King, the state police were all kind of, there wasn't any nefarious, there was no accelerant, the accelerant dogs didn't sniff anything, there was no, video cameras from the neighbors' houses, anybody creeping around the building before it happened or anything like that. So they're pretty sure, they think it was, a piece of equipment, and they really can't say whether it was that or not. They think it was, and so they left it undetermined, and that's where, and then as soon as they finished their investigation and all, 7 or 8 investigators were all on the same page, and then they had the go-ahead to tear the rest of the building down, and I believe it's down now. I think it's just
Thank you. It came down last week, the
Right.
chimneys were down, they were hauling stuff off the site.
I think it's
Very
just
sad day that it's gone, right? A lot of people in this town spent many special nights there, but thankfully, the project is gonna move forward, so.
Right, yeah, and that's, now it is safe, and I understand that, a lot of the residents, it is an unsafe thing, but it was fenced in, and we really couldn't, it was such a high value loss for the owner. They had to really investigate it, and they didn't want to spoil any of the evidence, just in case anything was out of the ordinary. So that's kind of the gist of it there.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Anyone else, anything for the chief? Mr. Doyle?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for a very thorough report, and my compliments to you and your department for a job very well done these past 6 months. I'm sure you and Mr. Dennehy may have begun these conversations already, but we have a changing landscape in the town that may well require augmentation of our fire resources that we're familiar with at present. We have a possible care center on property of Milton Hospital. It's under negotiation for sale. We have an expansion of Winter Valley. We have approximately 8 40B applications in town. So the community's landscape is going to change. The types of facilities are going to change. And I was wondering if you all are taking a look down the road as to what might need to be planned to augment what we have now to ensure the same high-quality standard of fire service and protection once that is built out. And what else we don't know about.
And I'll give credit to Chief Larson and Chief Grant. When they started these new fire stations back years ago, the plan was always to always make sure that we had room in case we did need to expand, whether it's equipment or personnel or whatever. So I think with the new firehouses, there is that, we do have that room. We didn't want to make it too small and have to make an addition. We wanted to make sure that we had some room for any kind of changes. And the fire service has changed tremendously in the last 20 years. It really has. So anticipating change is something that we do have to be prepared for. And I agree. The fire department that you see in Milton right now will not be the fire department that you see in 20 years. And I think, starting with the infrastructure, these new firehouses is going to change the department for the better. This new software that we have will change and get us up to speed with a lot of the other cities and towns around us. And there's always, you look at our staffing. Is our staffing, and I know Chief Grant, and I know Chief Larson, and I know Chief Alfanato have been saying this for years, is that, one of fire trucks don't put out fires, fire trucks don't make people better, it's the people that do it. And, so, yeah, if staffing is big, and staffing is having the people to do the work and have the people to be there, is very, very important to us. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and there are some things that, we're prepared to do if we need to, and we'll definitely go that way. And,
Thank you.
We've had the conversations a couple of times, trying to move
And the
forward.
work that the chief is doing with the town planner and the building commissioner, knowing these plans and helping him read some of these 40B applications for height and, you know, what type of equipment might be necessary to reach those. Chief Madden, working directly with Joe Klondike and Tim Zawinski is the step in that direction of knowing what these developments are gonna look like, Walcott Woods, or, you know, I'm sure they've been in the Hendry's building several times. We're still waiting for our tour through the building, but I'm sure.
Well, we showed up one day.
Lieutenant Italiano has been in there several times to look at what's going on. But
Right,
yeah,
and that's,
very-
to that point, one of the things that, you know, looking at is, you know, the ladder truck is on the schedule for capital improvement, you know, capital purchase. And one of the things that we are looking at is, you know, to augment that piece of equipment, you know. Do you go a straight ladder or do we use a tower, you know? Once you get above 3 floors, the adequate reach of the fire department is about 3 stories. And once you get 4, 5, 6 stories, then it becomes a challenge to us. In a tower where you have a bucket at the end, where you can put 2 or 3 people in that would help. You know, we've started that process of looking into it, have the ability, the opportunity to go in and visit Boston Fire with their tower ladders. They have 2 of them. Randolph just received a brand new one that I haven't had an opportunity to look at yet, but it's one of those things that, you know, if we put ourselves in the right way with the equipment, then, you know, preparing for that is definitely something that we're looking to in the future.
Thank you. That pointedly addresses what I was having in mind.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you to you and Lieutenant Italiano for all the work on the 40B projects. The Board of Appeals is really dealing with an awful lot on their plate, so it's very important to the residents, especially in the affected neighborhoods, but throughout the town, that all of the town issues get vetted and that we're making sure we've identified everything. So thanks for all of the hard work on that one.
And I actually remember what I was talking about, the 1,500 permits that were out, the building permits. Lieutenant Italiano looks at any time that they have to put in smoke detectors or change smoke detectors in any building that gets upgraded. Lieutenant Italiano has to look at that, has to sign off on that. So he has been extremely busy, and you know, it's been one heck of a year, and, you know, I can't thank him enough. He's been fantastic.
Chief, do you want to stay with us for the next agenda item, which I think is a brief item, unless, Mr. Zulus, did you have a question or a comment?
Three quick points. One is the fact, Chief, that you operated within your budget and actually are returning money in your first year is a big deal. And I think you deserve a great amount of credit for that. And it's a big deal, and it should be a great incentive for department heads throughout to be able to not only operate within your budget, but to return money to the operating fund is just it's a big deal as far as I'm concerned.
It wasn't a lot, but, you know, it's just one of those things that it's just
something.
something.
And second point, very quickly, the academy date is in December for the new
For 2
recruit
new
class.
hires.
2 new hires, and so how long before they would be in place? If they're-
The academy is 10 weeks,
10 weeks. So that's okay. So maybe March or so.
end of February, early March.
And then finally, the training, the hazmat tech rescue, the officer training, is that all in your budget at this point? Is that something?
So that's something that we're going to work through.
Okay.
You know, it's something that I may not be able to, or we may not be able to send, you know, 2 people through each one of those classes, but if we can send, you know, the technical rescue is 5 classes, and each one of them is 4 days long. It's 5 classes, 4 days long, and then there's a couple others that, you know, a couple weeks. So we can probably cover 1 or 2, but we can't get everybody, you know, 2 or 3 people to all 5 classes in a year. So it's definitely a work in progress to get people trained. And you know, one of the other spots that you look at is the fire investigation unit. Lieutenant Freeman and Lieutenant King are, you know, they've got 20+ years on the department. So we would be looking to train 2 new members to take their spots as well. So, you know, constantly. And it's one of those things where, yeah, we're going to try and get people through and make that a priority.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Madam Chair. And you read my mind in terms of, we'll make the next agenda item. I'll be brief, and I'd like the Chief to hear it. So.
That would be great, and I'll just state for the record, have been recused on this next item regarding the purchase of the East Milton's location, but if this is just a brief update, I'm going to stay in the room and listen and learn something too. And we have Mr. Wells on the phone. I'll rely on Mr. Dennehy to let me know if there's any question or comment that Mr. Wells wants to make at any time. Mr. Zulus.
Yes, this is the update on the land purchase for the East Milton Fire Station at 432 Adams Street. As authorized by town meeting, the select board has entered into negotiations with the Archdiocese for the purchase of that property. The town has been represented in that matter by Hemingway and Barnes. The Archdiocese was represented by outside counsel as well. They and with the involvement of the board, negotiated purchase and sale agreement. Purchase and sale was signed last week. The key terms are the purchase price, which was authorized by town meeting, $890,000. No deposit. Payment will be just at closing, and it is a 60-day due diligence period, so that the 60-day clock has begun for environmental and title and other due diligence, so that process is underway. And the closing timetable is after that period, and there could be some delay of that period depending on what may be found. We don't expect anything, but if something's found, could be a delay of that period. But the closing is anticipated to take place 10 days after the end of the due diligence period. So best case scenario, closing takes place in 70 days. So 70 days from July 22nd, so sometime in September, we calculated that out. So those are the essential terms of the PNS. It's the next step in the process, and hope for closing on this sometime in the fall.
That's great news. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it, and when you go back to, some of the things that we talked about, the equipment upgrade and the firehouses, the equipment upgrade of just the firehouse alone, and the quarters where the fire department will be able to go back and, after a fire like the Hoosier Club or just, after, what happened last night. I think there were approximately, the fire department in about 30 minutes did 15 incident runs for the trees down, wires down. They were probably soaking wet from the heavy rain, just to be able to let them go back and shower and dry off their gear and get ready for the next incident. These new firehouses will be huge for our members to do that adequately and do it correct and keep them safe. Cancer in the fire services is very, very prevalent. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's great news. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zulus, and thank you, Chief. We appreciate you coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. Okay, the next item relates to municipal broadband, the take rate contract. And I know then we're going to have another municipal broadband item, and do we want to, Mr. Zulus, you want to move something ahead on the agenda?
I would ask that we move item 17, which is item 17, which, let's see what the title is here in our agenda online. Where is it?
In the policy committee.
17. Right, report from the Municipal Broadband Committee regarding the warrant articles. And I'd ask that Mr. Lynch be recognized. The committee wanted to just make a very brief presentation on why the committee thinks it makes sense to include the appropriation from the cable fund article on the warrant, recognizing that the board will be voting on those articles tonight and the warrant will be closing tonight. So the committee has a very brief presentation, which I'll refer to Mr. Lynch. Very quickly, before we get to that, on item 10, the municipal broadband take rate contract. The status of that is we have not received a contract from CPC, which is the preferred vendor. And the vendor has said that if the town approves the proposal that was received and circulated, then the work could begin. So I think the town has wanted a contract. The vendor is saying, well, you have a proposal, and if you accept the proposal, we'll take that and we'll begin the work. So I don't know if the board wants to approve that proposal, which is the board has previously approved the reserve fund transfer for that purpose. But I guess the request from the Municipal Broadband Committee is that this board approve the proposal, and then that may move forward, and we will be guided by the chief procurement officer on whether we need a contract in addition to that proposal, if
Okay.
that's acceptable to the
What's
board.
the sense of the board on preference for this evening? We want to go ahead and approve the proposal? Or-
We don't have it, so see, we had it before, we don't have it tonight, so if we want to wait till next Tuesday, that shouldn't go away. Oh, it is, the proposal is, oh, okay, oh, great, oh, great, all right, great.
We did have a copy of it, yeah.
All right, great,
Yeah.
all right, so Susie's far ahead of me.
Yep, it's in number 10.
My apologies.
Yeah, that's great.
The proposal.
Yep, exactly.
So, anyone, any thoughts on consensus on approving the proposal this evening? We'll see what we can rely on the chief procurement officer to decide whether we need a contract or if the proposal is sufficient.
Right, yeah, as long as everyone's comfortable. I'm comfortable. I read through it. I maybe have a question. But
Okay. Would you like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the take rate proposal from CTC Technology and Energy for a take rate survey.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. Do we have any discussion? And if not, all in favor? And it's a voice vote, so aye.
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 Okay, we're unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on to, I think it's the discussion under the town meeting article.
Yeah, be item 17, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
mine.
and
Mr.
thank-
Lynch, thank you for
Yeah.
joining us tonight. We have a PowerPoint presentation.
We do, yes,
Okay.
and appreciate you taking me out of order here.
Thank you. I think since you have a PowerPoint, some of us are going to move
Sure,
the
yeah, no
chairs
problem.
behind
Yeah.
you so that we can watch it with you.
Okay. So tonight we'll be presenting on replacing the town's INET and potential funding sources that we've identified. So next slide, please. So for our agenda, we'll just briefly recap what the INET is, what its purpose is, why we need to replace it, why should we do it now, and how will we pay for it. And we'll do that in about 10 slides. Okay, so first of all, just to recap what the INET is, it connects all the town buildings and schools, so it serves the municipality itself. It's been owned and maintained by Comcast, and it's operated by the town's IT department. So it provides internet access to the town facilities and to the schools, provides a network for its servers, for phones, since it's voice over IP, and then also for police and fire emergency communications, as well as street cameras that are run by the police. So why do we need to replace the INET? So, as you all probably know the Comcast negotiations better than I do, Comcast has, in their most recent round, is only committed to supporting the INET through June 2024, and there's even a termination date in that agreement that's possible as early as April 2022. So that could expire in about 9 months from now. So that's one part of it. The other part is the existing network is inadequate. There's only a few strands of fiber. I believe there's 8, and I think 6 of them are only functioning. I believe that's from our discussions. We've discussed this with the town's IT department and the school's IT department. We also understand that it's maxed out on capacity. I believe when we spoke with the town IT department, basically they had to MacGyver a way to get a little bit more juice out of the fiber to set up the new communications between the fire and police. So they're really maxed out, and there's some really important services that are depending on this INET. Next slide, please. So what are our alternatives? So there's a few options with Comcast itself. Could we extend the service agreement? Probably not. Comcast said it's technically obsolete, so they don't want to do it. They've made that pretty clear that they don't want to continue to service the iNet. That's why it's such a short agreement that the town was able to get in the first place, just to keep that going in the interim. Comcast is also not interested in replacing the iNet itself. Another alternative, the town could always try to act as another business customer, come to Comcast and say, hey, I need business grade commercial service, but there's a lot of problems with that. It might be cheaper up front, but you're a captive customer. You have emergency services and school functions that are depending on this internet. So it doesn't really put the town in a strong position to control their internet source, and doesn't put them in a strong position to control pricing. So pricing could increase over time, because the town really would have no other choice but to go along with what Comcast or RCN wanted to do. So the third option, which we'll talk on the next slide, is for the town to replace the iNet itself, and so it would be a town-owned and operated iNet. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's essential town services that are running on the iNet. So by the town owning this gives the town control of the iNet. So it can ensure that those emergency services and school services are functioning properly. We could, by replacing the iNet, we can match the current capability of the iNet right off the bat, or the current iNet right off the bat. We'd also be laying a lot more fiber, so there'd be a lot of room for future growth. So, the cost really, in terms of construction, is more towards labor and the actual construction itself, and not so much per fiber. So, the CTC report that I'll get to in a little bit was, projecting probably somewhere around 200 or 300 strands of fiber. So there'd be a lot more capacity to grow as, internet demand is only increasing. So it puts the town in a strong position to support that growth. In addition to, cost concerns with trying to do just regular business service with Comcast and RCN, there could also be compatibility issues. There might need to be, reworking some services and functions that don't operate on Comcast or RCN. So, and then the last point, which we think is a very important point, is the iNet. By replacing the iNet, we've also essentially created a down payment on residential municipal service. And we think that's a very important objective for the town. We think fast, reliable, and affordable internet is a crucial part of modern society, and crucial for Milton residents and businesses. So what the iNet would allow us to do is, while we're laying this iNet, it's essentially also going to serve, part of it could serve as a backbone for the residential service. So if you think of a bunch of side streets, that would be the residential service. The iNet itself is the main street that connects everything. So we would use some of the fiber that's being laid, could be reserved for the residential service. And again, there's not really much, there's a negligible cost for using more strands. So it could provide an important down payment in this regard. But we also do see these as, they're bifurcated. So the iNet is crucial on its own. It does need to be replaced, but this is just an added benefit that we could couple this together with residential service. And this would be the first step towards that as well. Next slide, please. So we are, as you probably know, we already have a high-level design that was provided by CTC in January of 2019. The estimated high cost on that was $982,000. So, and we recognize that was 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago. So it's probably going to need some modest updating, maybe a little updating for inflation, some other adjustments. But we don't have any reason to think that estimate is wildly off base. And at this phase, we're really focusing on sources of funding for the construction itself. So maintenance costs and even potential other revenue sources, we would continue to explore, and would be another discussion item once we got to an engineering phase and to a more detailed design. And that map that you see over on the slide there is part of CTC's report. So that shows the outline of the iNet, connecting all of the crucial buildings in Milton. Next slide, please. So, and to the question of why do it now, we mentioned that the Comcast service agreement is very short and could be even shorter if it's terminated early. We already have a report from CTC with high-level estimates of how the construction could be designed. And then we've also have with the ARPA funds, we have a one-time opportunity to use these funds in one of the few ways that they're allowed to be used. So broadband infrastructure is one way, which we'll touch on a little bit in the next slide, that ARPA funds may be used for. So it's a great timing with this one. And then also, of course, too, as I mentioned, the pandemic itself demonstrated how important reliable and fast internet service is for schools and really for all government services. So that continue, regardless of the pandemic, internet access is only going to be demand is only going to be increasing. And then how will we pay for it? So the two sources that we've identified, as I mentioned, with the federal ARPA funds, we have the numbers up there of what we understand the town is either has received or will be receiving. And then also as well, there's the cable fund that was part of the Comcast agreement, and right now that has a balance of around $750,000. We have bonding on there as the fallback. That would be the option if neither one of those were a usable source. But we think that where we have federal funds and the cable fund, which are both tailored to specific uses for something such as this project, we think it would make the most sense to use those sources of funds. Next slide, please. And so here's the quote from ARPA funding allowed uses. You can see highlighted in red, necessary broadband infrastructure investments. So this project would fit that definition. Next slide, please. So the committee's request today is for the select board to identify the iNet replacement as a priority and to add it to possible uses for the town's ARPA funding. We're also respectfully asking that the select board today vote to add the cable fund article, which I'll show on the next slide, to the warrant for the next town meeting to allow to request an appropriation from the cable fund for this project. And then, next steps down the road are we would defer to the select board on the recommended mixture of ARPA and cable funds, because we obviously understand that there's other projects that the select board needs to consider for ARPA funding, and also that we don't want to suggest to deplete the cable fund itself, since we understand that there's other uses for that fund as well. So some sort of mixture of those funds as the select board sees fit. And then after that, assuming that at town meeting the appropriation is approved, then the next step would be, and we would be working on this throughout, would be to start working with contractors, or start identifying contractors for a more detailed design and construction plan. And then last slide, please. So I'll just leave this slide here. This is our proposed language for the article for town meeting for your consideration. Thank you. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. You're on top of it. You got everything covered. No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Lynch?
Madam Chair, if I just may
Mr.
add
Zulus.
one thing, thank you. If I just may just add one thing on the Comcast deadline. My understanding it is the town's option in April 2022 to extend it. So there is an option to extend it through 2024, and I believe it's our option. That's my memory of it. So there is a deadline, but it's not. I don't believe our deadline is April 2024. I think we can continue after that if we so desire. But there is a hard deadline of April 2024. And then finally, as Rob mentioned, the article that we're asking the select board to recommend has a placeholder for the amount because of what Rob described in terms of the mixture.
Okay. Anyone else? We'll take this up again when we get to town meeting articles, but is there anything that we want to talk about relating to this article before we get to that?
Anything, Mr. Wells?
I just have one question because I can't see this. I mean, I clearly understand it. You know, your communications are only good as your infrastructure, and we're talking about yesterday's infrastructure. So my question is this something, and I'll go with what the rest of, that they'd be ready for an October special town meeting, or do you think we need a little more information? I'd like to see town meeting pass it whenever it is presented versus saying, sending it back for further study. And I'm only asking that because I can't see what I'm listening and being guided by what you're going to say to me.
Is the question, is it ready for October? Is that essentially the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Zulus or Mr. Lynch?
So, in terms of, I guess I'm missing the question.
I think, if I may, I think the question is, do we think we're going to be ready for October? And if
Oh,
we're in
yeah.
October, and I think
Yes.
the answer,
Yes.
I think the answer is absolutely
Yes, okay.
Okay, I'm fine then. I'm good.
Okay. Okay, if nothing else, then Mr. Lynch, thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Okay, thank
For
you.
waiting around, we appreciate it.
Presentation.
Okay, then we're back to our number 11 on our agenda. We have an appointment to the Milton Housing Authority for a tenant member. We have information for Ms. Marilyn Morgan.
I move to appoint Marilyn Morgan of 65 Miller Ave as the town-appointed tenant board member seat of the Milton Housing Authority for a 5-year term.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Doyle. Any discussion? Ms.
Um,
Collins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to note that this came out of recent housing choice legislation, and if people aren't familiar with that, it's a panoply of different laws that have to do with affordable housing or low-income housing and fair housing, so.
Okay, thank you. If nothing else, then all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, we're unanimous. Thank you. Item 12 is a report from the Finance Committee regarding the American Rescue Plan Act and some upcoming projects, including DPW projects. Mr. Zulus and Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a meeting this morning. Mr. Doyle, Mr. Dennehy, Mr. Berkeley, Ms. Fernandez, Ms. Praval, and myself discussing two primary things with respect to ARPA, the potential projects and a procedure a recommended procedure for this board being in a position to make a determination on an allocation for that funding. And our resolution of that, or I believe the consensus between Mr. Doyle and myself, and Arthur can certainly fill in, is that we think an effective and efficient procedure which balances two things. One, the need for community and resident involvement, and two, the need to move quickly to get these funds working, because we do have $1.4 million burning a hole in a bank account right now, and we have projects that are stacking up for which it could be used. So we tried to balance both the need to deploy those resources, that money, in the most expedient way, while at the same time getting resident involvement in this decision. So what we came up with is our proposal is that Mr. Dennehy and his department make a recommendation to the Finance Subcommittee for a meeting on Monday, April 2nd at 8:30 a.m.
August 2nd.
August 2nd. What did I say? April? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And it's
Is that
only
last April or next April? My God.
it's only 8:40. You know, at about 10 o'clock, I could be going pretty haywire. So August 2nd. So that Mr. Dennehy will make a proposal on the use of those funds, that first deployment of $1.4 million for existing shovel-ready projects in town. That will assist us in getting the projects moving and saving the town money from bonding costs and from interest costs. And Arthur and I, in the Finance Subcommittee, will review that list during our meeting and come up with a recommendation for this board for its August 3rd meeting. We'll make a recommendation for the August 3rd meeting, and at that point, in order to get resident involvement, our view is that we should set a public hearing to get resident input into the proposal and resident thought into the proposal. And our view is that if we could set a meeting for that sometime in August, prior to the August 25th Select Board meeting, that would serve the purpose of moving things along and deploying this money in an expedient way so we can get moving on it. So that's our, and then once we get the public input, then presumably this board can exercise its judgment at its meeting on August 25th. So that is our proposal. Arthur, please fill in what I may have missed.
You articulated it very well, Mr. Zulus. I would just add that one of the additional values to the public meeting that will be held on this is the fact that this is a totally different type of funding program, and it would be very important to inform the public as to how it would operate and will operate based upon the federal requirements and regulations compared to traditional ways in which funding is approved. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so you're going, so the proposal is to have the, a recommendation from the Finance Committee come to our meeting on August 3rd,
Correct.
Schedule a public hearing before the 25th, and have another discussion on the 25th.
And hopefully a determination.
Hopefully a
on the
vote,
25th.
okay.
I would like action. We understand that there are all types of limitations on resources, both labor and materials supply. There's going to be tremendous competition among communities to get projects underway, and we have this unknown yet impact of the Delta on our economy and work that's ahead of us. So we do not want to put things off longer than they need be.
Madam Chair, Mr. Wells had a comment as well.
Okay. Mr. Wells?
So my only comment is in supporting both what Mr. Zulus said and especially what Mr. Doyle just said is I think it might be wise for the town administrator to, as he presents the projects, to pick those that have a threshold, pick a dollar threshold, and so those that might have to go to a public hearing, maybe some that are small, just knowing how hard it is to get things operational when they happen. And I leave that to you. I think maybe, I don't know what the list of projects is going to be, but I could see some that may be small, that are shovel ready, that can be moved quickly, that you could put forward right away, and then have a dollar level as to projects above that dollar level that go to the public hearing aspect of it.
Okay.
And I leave that to you, because I have no clue yet what he's going to come with for a list, but, you know, some of them are smaller projects that can be done quickly. I think it might be prudent to put a dollar level on those that take the extra step to having a full public hearing on it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells. Ms. Collins?
I was just wondering if we might think about whether that hearing would be in person or it would be on Zoom, because I think we've seen that often we get much more participation via Zoom, even though it's easier for us to meet in person to communicate. Just a thought. Or in some way welcome, we always welcome in conjunction with hearings, written comments and things, so just to make sure if we're going to do it in person that people can sort of respond to that, and we might, I don't know, put the list up or something. Thank you. It's a great point.
Okay. Well, do we have a preference then? Do we want to schedule it for Zoom?
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that
Agreed.
makes sense.
Okay. All right, so we'll work on it. I know we had some conflicts the week, I think, of August 11th. We had to cancel that meeting. So why doesn't maybe everyone work with Susie, and we'll try to come up with a date, and we'll figure out some potential dates and see when everyone might be available to schedule a Zoom meeting for that.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Zulus?
one thing I want to mention is that the discussion that we had in Finance this morning is that this will be an iterative process. In other words, this is not the only public hearing for the allocation of ARPA funds. This is the initial tranche, and whether it covers that entire 1.4, it won't, I can tell you, I don't think it will exceed that 1.4. But we do have additional money coming. We'll have another 1.4 directly with the town, and then approximately 5.4 we think from the county. So there'll be more public hearings for the allocation of this fund, but we thought it was important for this money that's already, we already have in, to really get moving on.
Yeah, and to that point, at one of the Mass Select Board Association meetings recently, there was talk about OPEB, which is the retiree health care, being another potential permissible use for ARPA funds. So I don't think that's as important as some of the capital projects, the broadband items, but that might be something that we want to consider later in the game, to some kind of a deposit to the OPEB trust.
Madam Chair, that's on the radar of the Director of Finance. She mentioned it this morning.
Okay, good, good. All right, does anyone have anything else on this agenda item? Ms. Collins, yes.
Just a question. In thinking about OPEB, I saw that and I thought about the county money, and I didn't know if Mr. Dennehy might have an update whether they've decided to do grants or distribute the money.
So, great question. I don't. They did meet today, and it was one of their agenda items on there. Their guidance is due middle of next month. They're working on it. I personally, I don't think it's going to be a grant application. I don't think the county commissioners want to get into that qualifying, non-qualifying piece of it. I think it's going to be more of a pass-through one. I know Director John Cronin, their new Norfolk County Commissioners Director, is going to reach out to the Norfolk County manager soon to get some feedback. But I will have an update tomorrow on their meeting today.
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yes, Mr. Zulus.
There were two other items that we discussed in our meeting, and I don't know if the Chair would like to take them up now or under a different agenda item. One was the possibility of a budget article for the October town meeting, and perhaps we'll take that up at the...
I thought we could do that under the articles.
Under the articles, and then the other thing we discussed this morning was the CARES Act money, and there may be another agenda item for that as well. But those are the other two
I don't think we
things.
specifically had that on.
Okay.
We just had the American Rescue Plan on.
Okay.
No, but some of that might be possible under the town administrator's report, since he has a proposal related to that in mind. Would that be fair?
Sure. Yes. Just an update, yeah, I guess, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
It occurred to me while we were talking, I think because we have a member on the telephone, I think we need to do a roll call vote. So I'd like to go back and revote the Milton Housing Authority appointment, just to be clear that it was,
Makes sense.
that it was unanimous by roll call. So if we could just go back to item 11, which was the appointment to the Milton Housing Authority of Marilyn Morgan, who is the tenant member. The motion was to appoint Marilyn Morgan of 65 Miller Avenue as the town-appointed tenant board member to the Milton Housing Authority for a 5-year term. Ms. Collins had made that motion. I think Mr. Doyle had seconded it. Is that correct? Okay, so I'd like to just revote that. So, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and Mr. Wells,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, Mr. Wells, were you here when we voted on the CT proposal for the take rate? You were. Okay, let's take that one again. That was number 10. And that was to approve the proposal of CTC,
Technology and energy.
Technology and Energy.
Yes.
And Mr. Zulus, I think you made the motion.
Yes.
And Ms.
Second.
Collins seconded it, so we voted it, voice vote, let's do it as a roll call vote. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells? And myself, yes. Okay, it was the CTC, did he hear what it was?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next item is number 13, Local Historic District Study Committee appointments. We had delegated this to Ms. Collins, so Ms. Collins, turn it over to you.
Well, it's very exciting. We have our final 3 members, although myself and Bill Mullen and Steve O'Donnell, who we also got thrown in the bargain, we all wish that we could have 5 or more, because every candidate, I think, would have been great. the considerations in the end were the need for an attorney, which is highly recommended by the Mass Historical Society when putting one of these together. And then some geographic distribution. We had quite a few people from over near the wharf in Milton Hill. I do want to remind people, anyone who's disappointed, hopefully we'll have historic districts, and there will be a new committee, and there will be other things for people to apply for as well. So I don't know if anyone has any particular questions. I think everyone had the applications.
Thought you were going to say the need for a lawyer is highly overrated instead of highly
No,
recommended.
it's a real asset in something like this. So, and I just want to thank everyone who applied and was very patient waiting, and hopefully it'll be a great way to kick off the fall.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll move to appoint Michael Haggerty of 320 Highland Ave, Mallory Walsh of 1072 Hillside Street, and Oteil McManus of 88 Wharf Street to the local Historic District Study Committee for a 3-year term.
1 year.
Oh, well, that's
That was
right,
a
one,
mistake.
that was right,
1 year.
for a 1-year term.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Mr. Doyle. Any discussion? And all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Next, we have several appointments, starting with the Bicycle Advisory Committee.
Madam Chair, I would move to reappoint Lee Toma of 58 Aberdeen Road, Eric Ask of 10 Stoddard Lane, Joseph Salone of 55 Concord Avenue, Michael Blackwell of 357 Blue Hills Parkway, and Vincent Urbanski of 22 Maryland Road to the Bicycle Advisory Committee with terms expiring July 31, 2022.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
I'm not sure Mr. Thomas been logging enough hours on his bicycle this year. No, I'm pretty kidding. Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you, and myself, yes. Commission on Disability.
I move to reappoint Joe Prondak of 525 Canton Avenue and Natalie Belmar-Elfer of 234 Lyman Road to the Commission on Disability with a term expiring of July 31st, 2024.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Not? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. We're on to the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Madam Chair, I would move to reappoint Cheryl Tajias of 660 Canton Avenue, Elizabeth Miller of 15 Cape Cod Lane, Richard S. Burke of 607 Pleasant Street, and Tabor Keeley of 674 Brush Hill Road to the Master Plan Implementation Committee with terms expiring July 31, 2022.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Housing Committee of the Select Board.
I move to reappoint, or to appoint, well, actually appointing, Thomas Callahan of 16 Orono Street, Kathleen M. O'Donnell of 20 Belcher Circle, and Danya Raphael of 63 Truro Lane to the Select Board Housing Committee for a 1-year term expiring July 31st, 2022.
Second?
All in favor. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, 2 more. The Retirement Board.
Madam Chair, I would move to reappoint Paige Ippolito of 525 Canton Avenue to the Retirement Board for a 3-year term expiring on July 31, 2024.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And Ms. Conlon, yes. And the last one is the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee.
I move to appoint George Tagayas of 660 Canton Avenue and Julie Horgan of 38 Hawthorne Road to the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee with terms expiring July 31st, 2022.
I'll second. Any discussion? Not all in favor. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, unanimous. for all of those committees. The next item is a discussion about the process for Equity and Justice Committee appointments, and I have Mr. Zulus for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The issue is, we have two openings in the Equity and Justice Committee. The question is how this board would like to proceed with filling those openings. The process that we used last year for the entire committee was to have one member create a slate of the candidates and have the board vote. The other alternative is to have all of the applicants and have a discussion among the entire board of all the applicants in a meeting. So the question is how the board would like to proceed with those two appointments.
Okay, anyone, any thoughts on this? Any preference, Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Zulus, do you have a recommendation to put forward?
I'm happy to do it again, to do the same, use the same process that we used last year. What we would do, I think, is to look into the applications that we had a year ago, and to seek new ones.
That worked very well. It was a very sound platform, and I would second that if that is your motion.
Happy to do it that way. Yeah, sure. All right, that's my motion.
All right, and then it's been made and seconded. Yeah, Mr. Wells, I don't know if you heard, but the motion is to have, we're going to delegate this to Mr. Zulus to come back with a couple of nominees for us. Okay, any discussion? Then all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, number 16 is a discussion of SUFA informational signs in public spaces, and specifically the business districts. Mr. Dennehy, do you want to speak to this? We do have a written report from the planning director that I think everyone has seen.
If this board, thank you, Madam Chair, if this board is not ready to take this up, if there was a death in the family of Assistant Town Planner Allison Quinn, her beloved father-in-law, Paul Quinn, passed away. May he rest in peace. It was a busy week with them in the department. If you'd prefer to have them in next Tuesday, we can do that, or if the board is ready to move on it, it's your call.
Well, first, I'm sorry to hear that about Allison Quinn.
Yes, please extend our condolences on behalf of the board.
Yes,
and-
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle, yes. What is the preference of the board? I've read the memo and I'm in agreement with the recommendation of the planning department. Any comments or anything that we want to bring back to the planning staff? Does anyone have a preference for taking this up tonight or deferring this? Ms. Collins?
They came in, Allison Quinn had come in, and she had made a very good presentation. So I'm prepared to support this. I thought the survey was also very useful to see. So they seem to have information. I thought it was a good recommendation.
And the survey was to the Chamber of Commerce members.
Right.
Regarding what they would like to see and not like to see in the sign. That I'll just read for the record, the recommendation of the planning staff is the last paragraph. It's the planning department recommends that the Town of Milton Select Board enter into an agreement with SUFA Digital for up to 3 outdoor signs in East Milton Square, Milton Village, and/or the Central Business District. Mm-hmm. It is further recommended that the Select Board restrict certain types of businesses from advertising on SUFA Digital signs. And I think an earlier paragraph says some of the concerns that members of the Chamber of Commerce raised related to advertising for alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, those types of items. So if we want to move forward with this, I think we could put the planning staff in touch with town council to reach out to SUFA and start working on an agreement that we could bring back to a future meeting. Okay. Yeah, do we have a proposed motion?
Yes.
We do, okay,
We
yes.
move to
Mr.
authorize
Doyle.
town council to review an agreement for consideration on behalf of the Milton Select Board by recommendation of the planning board for up to 3 SUFA's digital signs as described in the memo dated 7/14/21.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? And if not, all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, so we'll have this back on a future agenda once we have an agreement to take up. The next item is a report from the policy committee. Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Dennehy, and please extend our thanks as well as condolences to Ms. Quinn. The next item is a report from the Policy Committee, which is Mr. Zulus and Ms. Collins. We talked about draft policies at our, I think it was our last meeting, or if not the one before, and Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as a recap, the policies were circulated, I think, the day of the meeting, so the intention was to give the members a little more time to review the policies in advance of what effectively is a first reading. And our proposal is to have a first reading, basically to talk through the policies, and talk through some issues of the policies, perhaps mark them up. And I've received some comments from one of the members on that. And then to come back for a second reading and approval for a second reading. So this, I think, would effectively be the first reading of these policies, where we can surface any issues and then try to circulate redrafts. So if it pleases the board, I would just suggest going through each of the policies and having a discussion of any of the issues that arise from the policies. I will say, just as an overview, one of the comments that I've received is whether some of the policies are necessary, and whether we want to be as specific about the policies. And I will just say, as an overview, part of the intention is to create not only guidelines, but also a roadmap. So whereas there may be sources that a member could seek for example, what the aspects of an executive session should be, or what should govern the ethics of the board. While a member could seek out other resources for that, statutes, advisory opinions, I think it's the view of the policy committee that it's helpful to have all of that in one place that we can refer to, that the chair can refer to, that each of the members can refer to in real time as these issues arise. So that's really kind of the overview as to why we would have more rather than less. It's really just to provide that kind of guideline. So with that, if it pleases the board, we can kind of go through and see what we think of each of these as much as maybe we can tolerate tonight.
Okay.
There's a long list.
All right, well, okay, so we have them on our agenda. The first one is agendas.
And this one, just as an overview, it basically just talks about the process for developing agendas and content of the agendas. And basically, the chair arranges the order of the meetings, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have any specific comments on that that we've received yet.
So why don't we just do this as we go through, and we'll just read off the name, and Mr. Zulus will give a brief synopsis. If anyone has a comment, why don't we just weigh in at this point? And if there's no comments, that's fine. We'll just put them on for the next meeting.
And Madam Chair, if it pleases the board, we can also take comments after this meeting and
Sure,
discuss them at
yes.
the second reading.
Okay. The next one is committees.
This lays out the some of the committees of the board and the process for establishing committees and populating committees, broadly speaking. And one of the comments that I received was we haven't been having the chair nominate the membership of committees, and so we might want to open that up, and that appears in the fourth paragraph. In other words, after the board decides to establish a committee, and after consultation with the proponents of the committee, the chair would nominate the membership of the committee, and then the membership vote would take place thereafter.
That was actually my comment. I sent some comments over to Mr.
Yep.
Zulus. So, I think it's just a matter of what the preference is. The chair rotates, so at some point, if we do keep it, the chair nominates the committees, then at some point everyone will have an opportunity to do it. But that's really hasn't, tonight we had Ms. Collins nominating the local historic district committee. We have Mr. Doyle going to be nominating the community preservation committee, so it's just a matter of what is our preference, Ms. Collins?
Well, one of the strengths of taking turns nominating and not having the chair do it is that you can delegate some things because the chair is very busy.
So we could say a member of the board shall nominate its membership.
Yeah, the board shall delegate to a member, something along those
Yeah.
lines, because
Right.
that's how we've been doing it, just
Right.
often somebody volunteers.
Mhm.
And plus, I think it also gives the benefit of different perspectives.
Mhm.
Anything else on this one? Then we have duties of the chair.
Duties of the chair. I don't think I received any comments on that. So, yeah, sorry, I fell down on the job there for a minute. This policy just lays out in general, and in some specific instances, what the chair does on behalf of the board and what the chair does as the presiding officer at meetings of the board.
Ms. Collins?
So number 5 speaks to the previous one.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
So we might delete that.
Right. And number 3, keep all board members fully informed on issues of general concern. That's only complicated a little bit by open meeting law. So it is important for everyone to be fully informed. But I guess that doesn't mean that it's not done within a meeting. So you can just wipe that out. That was me thinking out loud. Thank you for your indulgence.
Yeah, it would have to be done at a meeting.
Right.
You know, or sometimes it's the town administrator communicating. with
Right,
members,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a really important point to make.
Okay, then duties of the secretary.
This is a lot shorter, and as the secretary, I appreciate that. This is basically just overseeing we called it the journal of the meetings. I think we'll probably just revise that to the minutes. I think it's probably useful to revise that to the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, duties of the vice chair. My only comment was just to delete the hyphen.
Yep. Yeah.
Any comments on the vice chair?
Love its succinctness.
Okay, executive sessions.
And this was reviewed previously by town council when we did it, when we initiated this, I think, year before last. But this is one that is governed by statute, so one question is, should we have it since it's governed by statute? And then another comment that came in was whether the secretary would be able to release minutes, and then on what time frame we would suggest a declassification of executive session minutes.
Could we also maybe just add the statute here, even if it's just at the bottom in the lower corner?
Yep.
In case somebody, future member or someone is looking at the policy and wants to check the statute for
Yep.
questions or follow-up. Anything else on this one? Executive session. Yes, Ms. Collins.
I just wanted to respond, thank you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Zuls's question about timeliness of reviewing and releasing executive session minutes. I think that might also be governed by statute, but we can look into that. I'll make a note
Okay.
and see if I have something on that.
Okay, then Finance Committee.
Finance Committee, so we have the same issue on who would nominate the members. We can make that conforming change. Perhaps say that the members will be nominated by a member of the Select Board.
It's usually kind of a board discussion of who wants
Yeah.
to serve on what committees, and
Yeah.
everyone expresses their preference.
Yeah, maybe we delete that altogether.
Anything else on Finance Committees?
So Mike, you're suggesting that we eliminate the paragraph on membership?
No, maybe the second sentence, we just say it will consist of 2 members, and nominees for the committee must be presented in an open meeting and appointed by a majority vote of the select board.
That's fine. I agree. That's good.
Okay, and,
I wanted to ask one question about this that I noted when I did a reading earlier, and that was the minimum meeting on a quarterly basis with the imperative of finances. I'd like to suggest that it be on a monthly basis as a minimum.
at least monthly rather than quarterly?
Yes.
Okay.
If that's agreeable to other members of the board. And if it makes sense.
I think monthly is probably the right goal. I'm just concerned if you say, that shall meet at least monthly, that there could be the month of August where everybody's on vacation, and so, you're technically in violation of the policy of the committee, goes a month without a meeting. Whereas maybe it should be here that monthly is the goal, or we should meet monthly wherever
Right.
possible. There can be language like that
Right.
it gives a little more
Or-
flexibility, but
No
that
less
really
than
has
8
been a
times a
practice.
year. or
Sometimes it's been
something.
more than once a month.
Yes, many months, but, right,
Quarterly seems just
right.
not fiduciarily
Yeah.
responsible in today's economy.
Okay. Well, the policies committee's gonna take all these comments and come
Right.
back with something,
Mhm.
so. Okay, now we're on to meetings of the board.
So this basically sets up just an overview of the structure for the regular meetings and special meetings of the board. One comment was, and this is something we may want to discuss, and that is whether we want to note the goal of not taking up new topics after a certain time. We have here in the draft, we won't take up any new topics after 10:30 p.m. Unless a majority of the vote of the board votes to do so. It kind of sets up a marker for us, but it may be more formality than we want.
It's just easy to sometimes forget the clock, looking at the
Sure.
clock, and suddenly it's 10:45 and we haven't complied with this one
Yep.
if we haven't asked if everyone wants to continue. But I know the planning board tries to do this,
Mhm.
so.
And I think the school committee.
We'll
right?
just all have to collectively try to remember it.
Right.
All right, anything else on meetings? Okay, then, policy adoption. Is that the next one?
I think it's public, policy adoption, yes.
Policy adoption.
Yes, and so policy adoption is basically this process, it lays out this process that we're going through now, and that's a first and a second reading of the policies. First reading, we go through and explain the purpose of the policies, get feedback, and then the second reading, it would be, something to act on the agenda.
Okay, the next one I have on a couple of different lists here. Okay, rules of, I have one in my packet for public participation.
So
But I
that,
don't see that on our agenda.
That's up above in the,
oh, did
okay.
it not make
In
the
the-
Might
agenda?
not have made it onto the agenda.
Oh,
Let's see.
No, it doesn't look as if it did.
Oh, that's not.
I think
No,
we have
wait a minute.
operational policies twice.
No,
I
no,
didn't catch
it's
that.
K. It's K on the next.
Oh, public comment.
Select
Yeah.
board public comment.
Okay,
M-
yep.
Maybe the,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
So, the rules of order, so this would be the next one, rules of order. That's basically laying out that we would follow Robert's rules for our meetings and for our voting procedure. And it is, I will say, it is important to make that an issue, whether an abstention is a vote, whether an abstention is part of the quorum. those things do come up, and the rules are different depending on what rules you follow. And so this one, I've seen this one be very important
Okay.
in a prior school committee several years ago. The question of whether an abstention counted as a no vote or whether an abstention counted towards the quorum, whether it counted as a no vote. So anyway, so the point is it's an important thing to lay out.
Anyone, any comments on that one? Ms. Collins?
So this came up within the warrant committee because of their Saturday meeting, I think. And I think we should check in with town council because he delivered some guidance on that. And I just want to make sure that there's not some statute that talks about that, or maybe a court case or something, so that that our Roberts rules would be in compliance.
Okay. Okay, then the next one I think is public comment.
That's right. And this one I know, the rules of order may have been vetted, but I'll double check that. I know the public comment, public participation one. I know this draft that you have was reviewed by town council at the time. And the current draft was vetted by town council. Now, this was prior town council, but it was vetted by prior town council.
So this one provides for 15 minutes of citizen speak, limited to 3 minutes per person. Concerning items that are on the board's agenda. I mean, there could potentially be a time when items that are not on the board's agenda, rather, for that meeting. I don't know, I just question whether there might be times when we want people to comment on an agenda item if we don't have a public hearing on the agenda. So maybe that's something the policy committee could take
I
another
agree
look
with
at.
that, yeah.
Yes. And we've had instances where we do have something, and even though we've put aside time aside for that, we've still offered to people that they can do public comment instead if they have a conflict and need to leave. That's good.
I think, I'm trying to find it, I think there's something in here that don't we want comments that are related to things that are within our jurisdiction?
It's
Yes,
in that,
it's in-
it's in that same number 7,
Yeah.
where the,
Within the scope of the select board's authority. Okay, great. Okay, anything on this one? Anyone else?
I thought this was well delivered.
Okay, I have operational policies.
now, that was kind of a catch-all for a number of other policies, and Madam Chair, we have gone through, I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We've gone through 11 now. If we want to take up, given the time and given the agenda, if we want to take up the additional operational policies at a subsequent meeting, certainly wouldn't feel.
Okay, we have a few others here too. We have ethics, we have vacancies, but they're not on our agenda for this evening.
Yeah,
So
those
there's
were-
more anyway that we still need to talk about. We can
That's
do
right.
that at the next meeting.
That's right. Those are really, were under the rubric of additional operational policies, but we probably should lay it out in a specific agenda item.
Okay. All right, then, thank you very much to the policy committee. So this was our first reading from any of them, so we'll try to bring them back with second reading and maybe action on at least some of them at the next meeting. Mr. Doyle?
Madam Chair, going back to something that Mr. Zullo said in his introductory comments, and based upon some questions that I've received during the last several months in particular, I'd like to suggest that once this is finalized, that it be available in toto on our website.
Okay. Yep.
I've had numbers of people say that what is there currently about the responsibilities of the select board, the nature of the select board is, from their perspective, and I'll use their term, inadequate. It isn't, somebody said, non-informative.
The select board page on the
Yes.
website? Okay, I mean, a lot of it is governed by statute, but it would be helpful to put these up
Right.
online.
Or whatever you can,
Yeah,
well beyond what's there now.
Right, and it's something that a lot of other towns, other select boards have done too, just put this packet like this online.
okay, the next agenda item is the town meeting articles. And the discussion of articles. So we have a package, Susie Stewart has put together in one document all of the articles that have come in to date. And we can talk about them this evening. I think we have at least 5 or 6. I'm not sure where. There's some potential for school building article. Mr. Zulus, is there any update on that?
Yes, the update, Madam Chair, thank you, is the school building committee will not be going forward with an article for October, but if there is a January town meeting, the school building committee estimates or projects that it may do it at that time.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Wells had something he'd like to speak about as well.
Mr. Wells?
Mr. Wells?
Sorry, I had on mute. Are we on warrant articles?
Yes.
I apologize, the game just ended, so I was, Milton won. So there were two, Madam Chair, just 2 issues. One is we'll need an article to move that $600,000 that the capital committee parked in capital stabilization earmarked for the fire station project. We'll need an article to move that actually into the project. And the second thing, Michael, you can allude on this if you want. We had a meeting today, Dan Clark, Brian Walsh, myself, with Finance Director Karen Proval and Mike Kelly on it. There's an outstanding, it's like a $330,000 bill to the OPM that we can't pay in 22 without a town meeting vote. The money's there, we just need a town meeting vote to do it. It's more of a procedural thing, so we will need an article for that. And I believe Michael Karen's going to drop the article, and if you don't have it, you'll definitely have it by tomorrow morning. So those 2 definitely need to go on to the October special town meeting.
Okay, so Mr. Wells, those are new to me. One of them is regarding a transfer of $600,000 to the fire station building committee, is that correct? And then I missed what the other one is. It's another capital article?
Mr. Wells?
Sorry, I muted myself again. I'll let you talk. Yes. So in the actual billing of this during the design phase, there is a invoice from the OPM for work done in 21 that we need to pay in 22. So the money is there. We just need an article to move it from the article that we approved to pay it in 2019 and move it to pay it, what are we now, fiscal 22. So, and Karen is, if she hasn't drawn that article up already, it will be to us by tomorrow morning. They say it's more of a procedural thing. It's not that we have to go find the money and get the money's there. We need the article to actually expend it.
Okay, so Mr. Wells, do you know if town council's been involved in the discussions on these 2 articles?
I believe so.
Right. So, anyone have any comments or questions on those 2, which would fall under our catch-all other articles? Okay, then, so, Mr. Wells, I think we'll need to follow up with town council tomorrow morning then to get both of those articles. It sounds like it's really just a matter in both cases of transferring funds.
That's exactly right. So actually, going back to the spring town meeting, this was actually discussed in the overall funding of the whole project.
Okay.
That money, because Mike Zulus, I remember, in the East Milton Fire Station discussions, we actually talked about, would we need to use that for that, which we didn't do. So now it's there, and we have to actually take this to procedural vote to move it actually into the project.
Okay, so why don't we consult with town council on both of those?
Okay. And Karen, she did a great job. She was on top of this, as was Dan Clark, and we had a very productive meeting by Kelly as well today. So I
Okay.
told Mike Denny I want to get on tonight. I just say it's more procedural than it is substance. We don't have to look for the money. We know where the money is. It's just the procedure of doing this. So I concur with whatever you want to do as far as consulting town council in the morning.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells. So today was the deadline for articles to be submitted. We had no citizens petitions. The other realm of articles that we're looking at, we have a stormwater bylaw amendment that's in, which I understand is a technical correction, and that's in our packages. We have an article relating to, a draft article relating to an appropriation from the cable fund, which is what we discussed earlier this evening. We had municipal light on our agenda, but I don't think there's anything else. It's just the cable fund article for the broadband.
That's correct, Madam Chair. I think the second municipal light vote, the first vote was an approval in May. The statute requires 2 town meeting approvals within a 13-month period, and I think the broadband committee is projecting that for January.
Okay.
And yes, I believe we're projecting that one for January.
Okay, we're also looking at the Randolph Avenue sewer betterment article for January rather than October, so that is coming off the list. We have another article in the package for acquisition of property at 41 Wharf Street. We also have a zoning amendment article from the planning board, which relates to earth materials removal and deposit of fill, which I think relates to the tree article that they submitted to the May town meeting, and is some amendments to that. So that's a fairly lengthy 3-page article. We have FY22 budget revisions. I wanted to bring an issue regarding the law budget to the board's attention, and I don't know if the finance committee wants to consider articles. You mentioned this earlier, and we could take it up under this agenda item. Mr. Zulus?
Yes, Madam Chair, we discussed, there is, let me see, let me try to describe this in the best way possible. At the May town meeting, the budget on which we were estimating the Commonwealth's budget, the state budget, that included the local aid. We were anticipating an additional $62,000, of which $57,000 was appropriated by town meeting to the school department and $5,000 to the library, I believe. Subsequently, that budget, the state budget for local aid, was cut for Milton by $45,000. So we are, at this point, $45,000 off with respect to our budget. In other words, what has been allocated to the school department, if you will, is $45,000 more than we had because of this small cut to local aid. So the question is, do we reallocate our budget based on that $45,000 difference in local aid from the state's budget? Or do we deal with it in another way, through a reserve fund transfer? Perhaps town revenues come in greater than anticipated. So the question is whether we, the thought this morning of the Finance Committee was that the Finance Director should meet with the Director of Finance for the Assistant Superintendent for Finance for the schools and make sure the schools are aware of this and get some feedback from the schools on that. I think that was our discussion.
We discussed having a placeholder,
We discussed whether we should have a placeholder.
and then we could remove it if we didn't need it.
Right.
So,
I think, Mike, just a minor modification, 47,000.
Is it 47?
Change, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sure.
Just
Yep.
for the record.
Yep.
so in working on the law budget article, I looked back at last year's warrant for the special town meeting. I think it was October, might have been December. And we had an article that said to see by what sums of money the town will vote to amend the appropriations voted at in this case, May 2021 annual town meeting to determine how said appropriations shall be raised, whether by transfer from available funds or otherwise, and to act on anything relating thereto. So it's a general budget revision article that we could submit to discuss any changes we want to make to budgets. So we could use an article like that if we wanted to submit an article for this state revenue situation. The law budget one is different. That's really a transfer between lines that I want to bring up. So what's the preference for the board on anything related to the state aid issue? That the law budget's not affected by that.
I think this article, in an umbrella-like fashion, gives us versatility and flexibility, so I would support it.
And I agree with that, and it also, if we find out subsequently that there isn't an issue, right, or that it can be dealt with in another way, we can always pull the article. But I think it's good to have it in place, plan for it, and then if something happens prior to the warrant going to print, then we can always pull the article if circumstances allow.
Okay, so we could submit this and then see where the discussions between Karen Preval and Amy Dexter wind up. And it may be that one of these other avenues of funding is how we want to decide this. I think we'll need to know fairly soon, because I think the warrant committee is going to be meeting in early August to start taking up the articles. So we could submit a general budget revision article. And then I wanted to bring to the board, and I should be in the package of articles. I wrote a draft of an article. I sent it over to town council and asked them to take a look at it, and they just had some minor changes. But the idea here is, and let me just step back a minute, the law budget, a couple of years ago, when I was on the finance committee and serving as the chair of the finance committee, a couple of years ago, we were looking at a difficult, because we're always looking at a difficult financial year, but we were trying to close a budget gap. And we had a request from town council to raise the retainer from $65,000 to $75,000. And in the context of making several budget adjustments to balance the budget, Ms. Collins remembers, I see her nodding, we decided, we talked with town council, I talked with John Flynn and then Kevin Freitag about keeping the retainer steady at $65,000 rather than increasing it to $75,000. The retainer is a flat fee that the town pays to town council for general town council services, not related to litigation. All of that gets, as our board members know, all of that gets paid under the professional services line. So currently we have a professional services and special services line of $280,000 for real estate transactions, litigation, anything that's outside of general town council work. And we're paying town council a retainer of $65,000 for all of the town council work. Over the last few months, I've been realizing that there's a lot more work on town council's plate that falls under the category of retainer, particularly with respect to public records requests. And that's occupying an enormous amount of town council's time, and it's all being billed under the flat fee, also known as the retainer, but it's really a flat fee. So what I think would make sense is to increase the retainer by $10,000 and decrease the professional services line by $10,000, so it has no bottom line impact on anything. This is just a transfer between line items, between the professional services line to bring that down by 10 and to increase the retainer so that we're paying a little bit more, not a significant amount more, but a little bit more for all of the services that town council is providing under the flat fee invoice that we get every month. So what is the board's thoughts on making that change? If in a given year we find that we're in a situation where we pay down the professional services line and we still have a shortfall, the town's practice has been to go to the reserve fund to pay the legal bills out of the reserve fund, as well as paying snow and ice deficits or anything else out of the reserve fund. We don't know from year to year what the law budget is going to be for professional services, litigation cases, real estate transactions, special projects. Anything can become very busy in a given year and not be busy in a subsequent year. So that's always an estimate, as this board knows. And last year we did not pay down the professional services line. The law budget actually returned money in that line, not in the retainer, but in that line item. So we did not need to go to the reserve fund last year for the law budget. So this would be to, when it comes right down to it, town council is ultimately being paid at an extremely low hourly rate for the town council services that is being provided. So, so that's I'd like to see our board submit the article that proposes to do this. Any thoughts from the board?
Let's do it. I'm for it.
Ms. Collins is for it?
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
It's an internal adjustment to the
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just an
budget for
internal
legal
adjustment.
fees, so. yeah.
But because we're moving between lines, we would need to get town meeting's approval. Okay,
And
so,
I would just say, I'm in favor of it. I am generally aware, just from seeing email traffic, that there has been, I think it's fair to say, an explosion of public records requests over the last, I don't know, 9 to 12 months. Not by a number of residents, really by just 2 or 3 residents, but nevertheless, an explosion of those public records requests that the town council has had to pay attention to. So I think it for that purpose, it really makes sense, given that that role has increased significantly in the last 9 to 12 months, I would say.
A question, do we keep track of the legal costs for public records requests?
it's all on the invoices for the flat fee. Yes.
Okay,
We
so,
could, we don't-
so
we
we
don't
could
have that.
disaggregate that
Yes.
figure and see what
Yes.
exactly it is. I'd like to see what that looks like and how it compares over time.
Okay, I think Mr. Denny can provide that information. So I think we have a universe of 7 articles, with the 2 new fire ones that, actually 8, I'm sorry, because we're gonna add the general budget revision. So I think we have 8 articles going to the October town meeting. So it's, and in the way we'll deliver this, to Susie, to the warrant committee, would be to combine all of them into one Word document. Our board sometimes is, well, we are the ones who order the warrant. I think for at least to send these to the warrant committee, we probably should put, the articles are gonna take most of the discussion up front, which I think would be probably the 41 Wharf Street, the planning board article. I think we'll have to get more detail on these fire articles. Maybe they need to be closer to the front. It seems to me the law budget, the general budget revision, and the cable fund probably could go at the back of the warrant. Because we may need people, the planning board will probably want to speak to their article. So we can put them in some kind of a general order along those lines and get these over to the warrant committee. So is there anything else on town meeting articles before we have a motion to the warrant?
And we've captured Richard's,
Yes.
Yeah, I have them on my working list here, so
just wanted to reconfirm that.
we'll get those tomorrow. We'll work with town council on those tomorrow. Okay,
That
Mr.
being
Wells,
the-
did you have anything else?
I'm ready to vote, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I think we're on to number 19 then, which is to close the warrant.
So, Madam Chair, I'll move to close the warrant for the special town meeting to be held on Monday, October 25, 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes?
Mr. Azulis?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, we have a couple of one-day liquor licenses.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve a 1-day liquor license for August 26, 2021 for the Forbes House Museum August Barn Fest event.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Ms. Collins. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes?
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And a second one for the Forbes.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve a 1-day liquor license for October 7th, 2021 for the Forbes House Museum October Barn Fest event.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes?
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, we have meeting minutes. I think we're going to defer the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And we also had, some meeting minutes for executive session at the end of the agenda, but all the minutes, we don't have minutes for this evening, so all of them are deferred.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Town administrators report at 9:42, a little late tonight.
That's okay.
Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one brief subject matter. We hinted upon it earlier tonight. So we had, Finance Committee also discussed CARES money. So Director of Finance, Preval, has identified there's roughly $500,000 left in CARES. There's $136,000 that has been encumbered. Included in that is approximately $35,000 that's left over from COVID testing that took place last fall and into the spring of this year. Basically, we've had discussions throughout town about how to use this money, which will expire on December 31st of this year. Based on recent news, I'd like to have the health director in next week if we could, just to catch up with her, but there are COVID cases in our community. I believe there were 3 cases confirmed yesterday, all vaccinated individuals. So I think the need for testing is going to become relevant again. I would suggest, or maybe make an ask of this board to increase the amount of the Transformative Healthcare Fallon ambulance contract, which currently sits, it was a $600,000 contract with a $35,000 balance. Possibly $150,000 of that remaining $500,000 to start with testing at the DPW yard again, potentially August 29th, which is the Sunday before, everyone gets back to school and the town gets back to normal. We found very successful turnout rates. Obviously, it's a regional COVID testing site. It's not just for Milton residents, but some of the other things that were tossed around were obviously PPE was very necessary last year, so we want to make sure that we've got an ample supply of that. Health Director Kinsella and Lieutenant Caputo from the Milton Police Department were talking, about essentially finding a location to store this and potentially buying a trailer that could house more of this so that we're ready for the next one. It was a mad scramble for Chief Procurement Officer Mike Kelly to secure that, so I think now is the time, and some of the CARES guidance has allows us to now create an inventory for that. But basically, there's an ongoing discussion about how best to spend this. But that was part of what we talked about today with the Finance Committee. I'm not sure if Member Zulus or Vice Chair Doyle would like to speak to it further, but the idea is to prepare for the fall. We're all hearing about the Delta variant, and I think it would be worthwhile if Ms. Kinsella could come in and just give us a COVID update as well, because it's in our community.
We should probably put that on for our next agenda item.
Yeah.
Ms. Kinsella, as well as the CARES Act and the testing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And just to add, that would give us 185,000 total for.
Right, which would be a
the testing.
little over 2,200 tests.
Right.
We performed over 6,600 tests with the last go-around. So.
And then, Mr. Dennehy, what would you need beyond that for the equipment and the storage capability?
So they're working out the numbers for that. Lieutenant Caputo is talking about securing a trailer through state contract, and just the PPE stuff is also on a buying list that Mike Kelly could secure. So we're going to put all those numbers together, but well within that $500,000.
So maybe have that for the August 25 meeting? Great.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Dennehy, anything else this evening under your report?
No. Well, very, very briefly, I want to thank Eversource particularly. There were, as Chief Madden mentioned last night, there were several trees down. It was a very coordinated effort. I believe Meredith Circle was the last neighborhood to be put back online, and as I came to the Council on Aging tonight, there were 3 pieces of equipment up there trying to get power restored to that neighborhood. But Chief Madden, Chief King, Chief Director Berkeley all commend Eversource for their responsiveness last night. And there was a pretty active hour or two when that storm came through. So once again, just want to thank all our public safety officials.
It was quite a storm. Some of us were at the Master Plan Committee meeting and the Housing meeting, and Affordable Housing Trust all met jointly, and it was quite a show of outside the window of the trees blowing outside. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Dennehy. Under the Chair's report, we have here a topic to get some initial thoughts on the 20th anniversary that is coming up of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack on this country. I don't think the town has normally had an observance, although I saw an email just before I came into the meeting from the fire chief about some observance that they might have just as a fire department. on 9/11, but a few days ago, the veterans agent Kevin Cook sent an email saying that he was been giving some thought to the 20th anniversary coming up, and he would like to do something for it in town. And I had actually been having similar thoughts, and others may have as well, that we should think about whether we want to do something for the 20th anniversary, even though we don't typically have a town-wide observance. So when Mr. Doyle and Mr. Dennehy and Ms. Stewart and I were planning the agenda, we put it on the agenda, but we also had some different ideas. Ms. Stewart had an idea for a charitable event, and Mr. Doyle had some ideas about time that we might want to consider and state events. So it's really on here as to open it up for a discussion and see how we might want to, if we want to plan something, and if so, what we might like to do and what would be the appropriate time and location, all of that for it. You want some of the ideas that we talked about when we were planning the agenda were having an observance either Saturday morning at the times that the planes hit the buildings, the times that are seared in everybody's memory, 8:46, 9:03. Maybe we'd ring the bells, maybe we would have the clergy involved, fire and police departments involved. Mr. Doyle had an idea about whether we should consider something for Friday evening versus Saturday morning in case there are state events. A vigil. And Ms. Stewart had an idea about a blood drive, which has been done in other communities. So the thought was just really to see what people think about the upcoming anniversary.
Michael?
Member Wells?
Thank you. Can I speak?
We can hear you, Mr. Wells, yes.
So thank you. So just a couple of thoughts. Michael knows this. In the first year, we had a pretty significant memorial on Town Green. I don't know if many of you realize this, that we had a pretty active role in 9/11. Me personally, I was there off and on for 3 months. But this community supported 500 first responders over 3 months, and we made 2 trips a week. With huge support, both from public safety and from many citizens. So I think it might be prudent to touch on that. Out the role that we did play back then, a lot of people have forgotten that. A lot of people have forgotten 9/11. And the second thing is we did do one on the 5th anniversary. We had, you mentioned the Katie, I think the church rang bells. I know we had music, but I think it was in the morning. It was at the 9:03, but I'd be open to that. As former Commissioner Bratton said, when I was at the 15th, I was actually there, Paul and I, 15th, is that many people have forgotten it, but it is the most tragic day in our lives. So I think anything like that would be good. I think we definitely should make some commemoration of this event. So I'm open to whatever anyone else wants to do, and I'll be glad to help in any way I can.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Collins?
I think that it would be very fitting, and it sounds as if there are a lot of good ideas already. I do, if police and fire would want to coordinate, to my mind, it would be very welcome. But I don't have any particular thought about evening or whether it should be in the morning. I do wonder if this is an opportunity to, well, it's probably too late, but we should think about our holidays committee going forward, because that could be a big help.
I agree.
But thank you for everyone who is thinking about this and brought up ideas.
I think, Arthur, your thought about a vigil was that there may be state activities certainly there'll be federal activities.
Federal
to
and
observe
state
the
activities on
anniversary.
Saturday,
Yes.
plus the fact that it is a Saturday. And something that might be unique would be a vigil, candlelight vigil, that people could, with the interfaith council and other parties, police, fire, reflect and be prepared for the following day.
So that resonates with me, that visual with those groups, with Nika, with police, fire, that resonates with me.
On Friday evening rather than Saturday morning? I was leaning towards Saturday morning myself, because to me that's the time to observe it. But it is a good idea, especially if people want to focus their attention on Saturday morning, the 11th, on federal observances that are taking place or statewide events.
Well,
Ms. Collins?
and maybe we could check in with the police department and the fire department and see what their thoughts are too. And
Mr. Dennehy contacted them right away to ask them to start thinking about it. And we have not reached out to the Clergy Association, but I think we should.
right.
And Ms. Stewart, as I said, had an idea about a blood drive or a blood mobile that, and I forget, Ms. Stewart, was it a 9/11 organization that was the beneficiary, or was it a local charity?
No, actually, Children's Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital will organize the entire thing for you. You just need a place to park the bus. Or, actually, I believe, Brigham and Women's will do well. And, they just ask if folks can volunteer just to sit at the table, just to do signups, which I'm sure, folks from the town, I would be willing to just sit there and do it myself. It's very easy to do. And they give you posters, they do all the marketing for themselves, do email blasts, they can do walk-ins, it's amazing. 1 pint of blood, can help 4 children, and, it's a great resource, so. I've set up numerous blood mobiles, and that's what I did on 9/11, because we didn't know how to help.
Okay. So a charitable
Madam Chair?
fundraiser, or a charitable service project that would be another good way to commemorate the event. Mr. Wells?
Madam Chair, in a follow-up to that, there is a resident of the town, she doesn't know about the throw on the bus, Michelle Serpa. Her child was a child with cancer, and she's brought several of them here to the town. She's a great contact in there, so I could actually reach out and have put in touch with Susie. It's a great idea. We'll probably have to be in line, though. They only have one blood mobile, but maybe we could do it in a building. I don't know, but I could do that tomorrow for you, Susie, if put you in touch with her. She's done at least 4 I've been to in Milton the past 2 years.
Okay. I think, it sounds like Ms. Stewart already has some contacts with these organizations, but it can't hurt to put you both in touch, so. We can see whether that might be something we could do maybe on a Saturday afternoon or somehow related to the event. So how do we want to proceed? Do we want to delegate? I'm happy to do some follow-up. Maybe Mr. Doyle and I together as the chair and vice chair could talk further with the town administrator, Ms. Stewart, and follow up with the clergy, the police and fire departments, and come back with something a little more concrete where we could bring an idea forward to the board and have another discussion about it. Probably not on the 3rd unless we get some quick input, but it may be for the 25th would be rather late.
Right.
It'd be very close to 9/11.
Why don't we come back on the 3rd and see what we're able to find?
that'd be a good
We may
idea.
need to,
We
we may
could
need to have it on a couple of
Put our
agendas.
foreheads together and
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you everyone for your input into the anniversary observance. The only other items under 23B, topics the chair did not reasonably anticipate. So just a couple of updates. One is that the town had a productive meeting with Massachusetts Department of Transportation, Howard Stein Hudson, and McKay Construction relating to the East Milton Deck project just yesterday, or just the day before. Yesterday. Mr. Doyle was not available, so Mr. Zulus and I attended along with the town administrator and Chase Berkeley, the Public Works Director. Senator Timmelty's Chief of Staff was also available. It was at the meeting. It was a virtual meeting. And we're going to have more information to report at a later date, but there's Howard Stein Hudson and Mass DOT and McKay Construction are all working towards trying to restore some of the parking in the square. So there'll be more details to come, but there is, they have been hard at work since our last meeting trying to come up with a solution to the problem. We also talked a little bit about the bump out at the post office, and they pointed out that's the goal there is to slow traffic down, and as right now it's under construction, and as the project progresses, people will may have a different view of that and may see the benefit of the bump out. Did I get that correct, Mr. Zulus? That was your question to them.
Yeah, I would just say on that, what the Department of Transportation representatives said was that the difficulty navigating that now is part of the condition of construction. And that when the construction is complete and when the striping is complete and when everything is complete, navigating that should be easier than it is now. And it will serve the goal of traffic calming without unnecessarily creating for the motorists.
Madam
Yes,
Chair, on
Mr.
that
Doyle.
point, following the earlier discussion where there was mentioned by the engineers of moving things further to the left that would facilitate a more easy turn, I tried that a couple of times. And you really have to go pretty far to the left in order to navigate that without having to do curb cuts. So I would suggest recognizing and respecting the information that Mike just shared with us, that we keep this one open.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we ask Mr. Dennehy to follow up on that? This is not an agenda item, so I don't think we can get into much of a discussion on that, other than we'll follow up on that point, Mr. Doyle. Thank you. And then lastly, they're going to send a person to explore any issues that pedestrians or folks with disabilities may have traversing the construction site, to just be sure that there's no safety issues. So that we brought that issue to their attention, that there have been some complaints that people are having a hard time making their way through the square. So that was going to be further explored. Also, yesterday we had a call that came together rather late at the last minute with the Department of Conservation and Recreation regarding the Neponset Valley Parkway, Milton Street, and Brush Hill Road intersection. And Ms. Collins and I attended that one along with the town administrator, Senator Timilty, and I think a representative from Representative Driscoll's
Consalvo,
office
yeah.
also attended. Yes, Consalvo from Boston, but I think Mr. Driscoll had an aide on the line also. And that situation is that the DCR is going to be having some public listening sessions and public informational sessions mid to late September, to hear from the public what people think about the current state of the intersection, what ideas are, and they're going to, they're not going to do anything in August because they know a lot of people are away on vacation, so they're going to put all of that off until mid to late September. But there'll be more information coming about that as we get closer to that time frame. So,
Madam Chair, one
And-
comment. If I
yes,
could just
Mr.
go back to
Dennehy?
the East Milton deck
yes.
conversation that we had. Operationally, the group that was on that call heard the select board loud and clear. They put pen to paper the following day and suggested some ways to mitigate the loss of parking in the square. So hats off to the group that was on the call, and hats off to this board for bringing it up, because they literally submitted a document to us the following day about ways to try to mitigate some of that. So thank you to this board, and thanks again to the group that was on that call for trying to come up with some solutions in a pretty, sticky situation. But literally, it was less than 24 hours that work was sent across to the town. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dennehy. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, some of us today were on the Mass Select Board Association webinar on the future of public meetings in this post-pandemic climate. There was some discussion of hybrid meetings, and the towns of Franklin and Stowe presented how they're handling their public meetings. And it was actually a very good discussion. And once we get the link to the tape, we'll send it around to everyone. It might be good for everyone who didn't see it today to watch the tape before we have a discussion at some point about how we want to handle our meetings going forward. When we met with town council a few weeks ago, we talked about potential for hybrid meetings, and I think MATV needs to make some changes to the room, or address some of the technical issues before we're in a position to do that. But these were good examples from two town administrators as to how they're handling public meetings in those communities. So that's all I have. Does anyone have a report this evening? Mr. Doyle?
Madam Chair, I turn to our colleague, Ms. Collins, because we, along with you and others, attended the master plan implementation housing committee joint meeting just recently, and found that that collaborative meeting was very, very productive in many respects. At least that was my outcome. We had an opportunity to review at least one major project, 444 Granite Avenue, and then to look at alternative possibilities for site locations for low-income housing. I shouldn't say low-income, affordable housing in the town of Milton. And there's more work to be done on that. But I thought a great step forward, and hats off to Allison Quinn for her very, very strong support for that undertaking.
Yes, I agree. Okay, thank you, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, just one acknowledgement along the lines of what Mr. Dennehy mentioned on the East Milton DEC meeting with Department of Transportation. I think it's important to acknowledge the efforts of Senator Timilty to facilitate that meeting and to contact people in government in order to make that happen. And so we can give more on that later when it's an agenda item in a future meeting, but I think it's important to acknowledge those efforts as well.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Ms. Collins.
I don't have any report at this time, but I think what Mr. Doyle referred to will come at a future time on an agenda item, so we can talk about it more.
Okay. Mr. Wells.
No report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comment response. We did not have any public comment this evening. Future agenda items. Our next meeting is Tuesday the 3rd. We're going to be on Zoom that evening because we're going to be meeting with Judy Barrett of Barrett Planning, who's going to give us an update on the East Milton Working Group's study of East Milton Square, and she has another Zoom meeting that evening, so she's asked us if she could join us by Zoom. So we're going to go back to Zoom for next meeting on the 3rd. Yes, Mr. Dennehy.
Director Berkeley from DPW will be here to solicit the water and sewer rates.
Okay, okay.
It's that time of year.
That time of year, that's right. Anyone else, any future agenda items? Or community happenings? Okay, then the minutes are being deferred this evening, so we don't have any executive session. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes?
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, Mr. Wells, we have some documents we're going to sign for all the appointments that we've made this evening, so we'll sign them, and then if you could go into the office at some point and,
Absolutely. I don't go tomorrow morning, I'll go Friday morning.
okay, Ms. Stewart will have them for you to sign, so thank you, everyone, we're adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.